Hello again, dear fellow YouTubers, and welcome back to my channel. I'm speaking to you from my home in the Metro Manila region of the Luzon Island in the Philippines in Southeastern Asia. And since this past April the 20th, 2019 has marked the 20th anniversary of the Columbine High School massacre, I wanted to upload a series of educational videos for those who wish to understand the massacre more profoundly, to get beyond the popular conceptions and or misconceptions and headlines. And the last one of these videos I'm going to upload concerns apparently a radio interview made of Connie and Angela Sanders, the daughters of a business and computer science teacher and sports coach David Sanders, who tragically was killed. He slowly bled to death before the police officers were able to locate the classroom where he was in safety, yes, but bleeding to death. And some or several students were in the same classroom with him. He had been shot early on by one of the two gunmen, either Eric Harris or Dylan Klebold, or perhaps both. But before he was shot, he had been able to quickly evacuate the Columbine High School's cafeteria, the Commons. Had he not acted so decisively, chances are that tens more, and then possibly in the worst case scenario, hundreds more people would have been killed. Because quite many of those students, despite being young and probably athletic and healthy, would have been paralyzed by fear. And probably those two boys would have enjoyed mowing them down with their semi-automatic guns as they would have been running away from them on the school's hallways. But David Sanders took action before tragically he was wounded fatally, and he saved potentially hundreds of lives. So in this radio interview, whose transcript was published on February the 25th, 2016, about 2 weeks after the ABC News 20/20 program's interview by experienced American television journalist Diane Sawyer of Sue Klebold, Dylan's mother, occurred. Sue Klebold had just released her book, or published her book, A Mother's Reckoning, whose proceeds will go to efforts to fund mental health enhancement programs, which of course are very noble causes. So Ryan Warner interviewed them. And the interview was made by, the transcript was written by Andrea Dukakis for the CPR.org website. Connie and Angela Sanders, whose father, Dave Sanders, was fatally shot during the 1999 attack at Columbine High School, have different views about the release of Sue Klebold's new book. Klebold, whose son Dylan was one of the Columbine gunmen, wrote Mother's Reckoning to explore mental health issues. Connie Sanders has empathy for Sue Klebold and applauds her work in suicide prevention. Angela Sanders thinks the book gives too much attention to the perpetrators of violence, something she believes can lead to more violence. Connie and Angela Sanders spoke with Colorado Matters host Ryan Warner. Edited highlights from their conversation are below. How do you both feel about the fact that Sue Klebold has written a book? Connie, my feelings on it were torn because I'm really passionate about the no notoriety. So my first reaction was, oh my goodness, is this going to be another blueprint for mass murder? But then there was a piece of me that once I started hearing it was about mental health, where my heart made a turn and said, anything that we can do to identify the risk factors, to get the general public to listen to what those risk factors are, is going to be highly beneficial. Angela, you wonder why 17 years later. I have not read the book, so I cannot speak on that. I don't know if I will read the book. In the interviews that I have seen and listened to, I feel like they are a really great tribute to Dylan. Again, obviously, I'm not a mental health professional, but just in my listening and my watching, I'm not seeing any aha moments. Connie, when I called her after the interview and I said, "What do you think?" and she said, "It was a nice tribute to a murderer." And the one thing that I love is that, we can have such differing opinions on such things. Many of our family members have never been heard. And so for people to hear the story of the people that murdered our family members, but our family members are forgotten, is difficult. Klebold said that she thinks of her son's actions as a suicide as well as murder. Well, technically she was right, because both boys had already decided that they would commit suicide during that attack. So that supposedly they would go down in history books as some, perverted or rather nihilistic heroes. And of course, so that they would never have to face the law enforcement officials. Something that Timothy McVeigh, whom they, or at least one of them, Eric Harris, admired, and who would be executed a few years or some years after this massacre. She acknowledged that's a controversial viewpoint, maybe one born of self-preservation. What do you think? Connie, so one of the things that I've spent a lot of time in my profession is you having empathy, trying to see the world from other people's perspective. And I understand her need to see it as a suicide. I don't know that any human being could manage the guilt and the emotion surrounding the fact that all of these lives have been lost or significantly altered by her son. So I think that's a self-protective mechanism. But again, it goes back to that kind of downplaying the murder side of it. But I understand her need to do it. She couldn't process what he had done with each individual person that was harmed. Angela, that might be somewhere where my sister and I actually agree. I definitely think that that's probably some self-protection for her. I'm not anti-Sue Klebold. I couldn't even imagine what this poor woman is going through. So I'm glad that even Angela Sanders is showing some genuine compassion towards Sue Klebold. And while she disagrees with some of her opinions about Dylan and some of her motives for writing the book, at least she appreciates her genuineness and feels sad that she's probably going to be hounded by this failure to see Dylan's suicidal and murderous tendencies until it was too late to stop him. And I do feel for her in that aspect. I just feel some frustrations in other places. One thing that Sue Klebold said in the book is to shut up and listen to your children. Does that ring true to you? Connie, yes, and I can say that as a parent. My daughter went through some really difficult things, and I myself missed some of the signs, and she ended up in trouble. It wasn't anything serious, but it was at that moment that I think I realized as a parent we have an influence on our children, but we are not the only influence. That may be where some of my identifying with Sue Klebold comes from, is that I have been in the position of that shock, that my child could do something like she did, and as a parent, didn't know. Does this conversation open up old wounds? Angela, I'm in a place in my life where everything is positive and happy because of my career and the things that I do in my life now. So for me, this is very emotional and it's very stressful and it's very hard for me to keep going back and reliving this every time something new comes up. I understand that it's going to happen, but I try and stay away from it as much as I can. Connie, this is very hard for me because I work with people convicted of violent crime and have about 100 clients at a time coming through my agency. So when I do things like this, they hear it. Many of them don't know my story. It's a reopening that will take some time to close, and it is somewhat difficult. I have Sue Klebold's book, so that set me back, and I had a difficult time. And after 17 years, there are times when you can't handle it. You know, I called Angela from inside my closet because I was panicking after watching the 2020 interview. You're like us. You read another CPR news and so forth. Funny end to the interview.